Who was the most popular president in American history? When asked this question, most people's first reaction is Franklin D. Roosevelt, the man who led America out of the Great Depression and to victory in World War II. His glorious record of 4 consecutive terms certainly proves his immense popularity at the time. However, Gallup poll data reveals that FDR is not the record holder. That honor belongs to a president who is now widely disliked around the world, George W. Bush. In his first year in office, thanks to his tough stance after 9/11, Bush achieved a staggering 92% approval rating, earning him the title of America's most popular president. Yet, this same beloved president single-handedly took America from its post-Cold War golden age and plunged it into the 2008 financial crisis. For this, Bush himself earned the moniker of America's dumbest president. So, how did he do it? George W. Bush was born into the Bush family, a renowned American political and business dynasty. The family's patriarch, Samuel P. Bush, started as an ordinary mechanic, but through his own efforts, won the favor of a banker, married his daughter, and with his in-laws' support, eventually took over the company he worked for, becoming a prominent American steel tycoon. The second-generation patriarch, Prescott Bush, used his father's fortune to attend Yale University, where he joined the secret society Skull and Bones, securing the family's ticket to the highest echelons of American power. He himself went on to be elected a U.S. Senator. The third generation, George H.W. Bush, was equally impressive, rising all the way to the presidency and taking the family to new heights. But as the eldest son of George H.W. Bush, the young George W. seemed to be a genetic anomaly, completely lacking the outstanding qualities of his forebears. Like most heirs of prominent American families, he was sent by his father to elite private schools to receive a top-tier education. But he clearly failed to live up to his father's expectations. In nearly every subject, he could only manage to get C's, and he even has the glorious distinction of once scoring a 0 on an English exam. In an ordinary family, grades like these would, at best, get you into a no-name college. But he, after all, came from a good family. As the heir to the Bush dynasty, he not only got into Yale, but also successfully joined Skull and Bones. This experience led him to believe that with his family status, he no longer needed to try. In the years that followed, he fully embraced a life of coasting. When Bush graduated from Yale and faced military service, the Vietnam War was at its peak, with over 500,000 American troops deployed. His father, George H.W. Bush, had faced World War II by
bravely enlisting and even participating in dangerous bombing missions over Japan, becoming the sole survivor of his crew. But when faced with the risks of war, the younger Bush did everything he could to avoid them. He used his family connections to get into the Air National Guard, even though he didn't meet the recruitment requirements, thus avoiding being sent to the front lines. In the National Guard, Bush continued his slacker lifestyle, spending his days drinking and partying. His superiors, fed up, moved him from a pilot position to ground crew. But Bush found ground crew work too tiring and didn't want to do it either. At his strong insistence, his father pulled strings to get him an early discharge. After his discharge, Bush was sent by his father to Harvard Business School. But he evidently spent this period of his university life drinking and having fun as well, learning nothing. This is clear from the fact that after graduating from Harvard, he took a huge sum of $50,000 from his father and used his father's network to start an oil company and still managed to lose money. But as he had long known, he had a good dad. In 1980, George H.W. Bush became Ronald Reagan's vice presidential nominee, and they won the election. Over the next 4 years, the elder Bush provided Reagan with a great deal of assistance, earning his trust and support. He was nominated for vice president again in 1984 and was widely seen as Reagan's successor. That same year, the younger Bush's failing company was acquired by a company called Spectrum 7, which was then promptly acquired by Harkin Energy. Bush made a fortune from the deal. From then on, his business career took off, but everyone knew it was all because of his father. Things were going smoothly until 1992, when his father failed to win re-election. Life suddenly wasn't so easy for George W. Bush. Frustrated, he turned to politics, determined to defeat the Democrats who had cost his father a second term and ruined his cushy lifestyle. Seeing his son finally turn over a new leaf, no longer content to just coast on the family name, but wanting to do something for himself, the elder Bush was gratified. Naturally, he mobilized his entire network to help his son. With the backing of a former president's professional team, even though Bush himself was unaccomplished and even described by voters as looking kind of goofy, he won his very first election to become the governor of Texas. He was successfully re-elected in 1998. As governor, he ran for president in 2000 and narrowly defeated the Democratic candidate Al Gore to become the 43rd president of the United States.
At that time, Bush inherited an America that was at an unprecedented peak of political, military, and economic power. Reagan and his father had brought down the Soviet Union, America's only rival, making the U.S. the world's sole superpower. The crushing victory in the Gulf War against the world's third strongest military had firmly established American authority. Building on this, Bill Clinton had constructed a U.S.-centric world order using global supply chains and financial tools to siphon wealth from around the world, leading to sustained high-speed economic growth that reversed America's long-standing debt and fiscal pressures. And in Bush's first year as president, America was hit by the 9/11 terrorist attacks. While it was a national tragedy, for Bush personally, it was a stroke of luck. It was the largest attack on American soil since Pearl Harbor, and it allowed him to become a war president, greatly expanding his executive powers. Furthermore, the event created a surge of national outrage. All Bush had to do was show a tough, resolute response, and his previously mediocre approval ratings skyrocketed. With a stirring speech from the rubble of the World Trade Center, the man who had only won the 2000 election through a court battle and his opponent's concession, and whose legitimacy was often questioned, saw his approval rating soar to 92%, the highest in American history. In the subsequent midterm elections, the Republican Party rode this wave of support to take control of both the House and Senate, removing all obstacles to Bush's agenda. With such a strong hand, Bush was full of confidence, ready to achieve something that would surpass his father's legacy. In his view, his father lost to Clinton because he chose to win and leave in the Gulf War without destroying Saddam Hussein's regime. The victory wasn't decisive enough to instill a strong sense of national pride in the American people. At the same time, because Saddam, who had dared to challenge American authority, was not punished severely enough, Middle Eastern terrorists lost their fear of the U.S., which is why they dared to launch attacks on American soil. With this mindset, Bush was determined to completely destroy his enemies. Immediately after 9/11, Bush established a global war on terror. On flimsy evidence, he accused Osama bin Laden's al-Qaeda of planning the attacks and demanded that the Taliban government in Afghanistan, which had ties to the group, hand over its members for trial in the U.S. The Taliban claimed bin Laden was not involved and refused the demand. Seeing the Taliban's defiance, Bush ignored their attempts to communicate through a third party and ordered the U.S. military to invade, launching the war in Afghanistan with the goal of completely destroying the Taliban regime. The U.S. military could crush the Taliban's conventional forces with ease, but it had no effective way to deal with fighters who hid in the mountains to wage guerrilla warfare or blended in with civilians to carry out sniper attacks. The final crucial mission could never be completed. America's investment in Afghanistan grew, as did its casualties. Over time, many of the Americans who had initially supported Bush began to question the war. As the next presidential election approached and his approval ratings continued to fall, Bush chose to open a new front, hoping a resounding victory would restore his popularity. So, at the United Nations, the U.S. presented a vial of an unknown white powder, claiming it was proof of Iraq's biological weapons, and used this as a pretext to launch the Iraq War. The war followed the same pattern as in Afghanistan: initial victories followed by a protracted and inconclusive endgame. Riding the wave of early victories, Bush successfully won re-election, but America would have to bear the consequences. The staggering cost of the wars quickly drained the fiscal surplus that had been built up during the Clinton years. To continue funding the wars, the government had to find money. Considering that raising taxes would inevitably lead to a drop in support, Bush chose to borrow money to fight. After the reforms of the Reagan and Clinton eras, the only entities in the country that could provide such a large sum of money were the major financial institutions. And to get money from them, you have to offer something in return. Thus, to sustain the wars, the U.S. government's regulation of the financial industry became increasingly lax. This exacerbated the problem of America's hollowed-out industrial base. The rapid outflow of manufacturing led to the loss of a large number of relatively high-paying jobs, and the proud middle-class society that America was once known for began to collapse. At the same time, the lack of oversight allowed financial capital to run rampant, which ultimately led to the 2007 subprime mortgage crisis and the 2008 financial crisis.